Hello and welcome to the program. This is Hat to Hat on uatv and I'm Olis Gerduk. The observance of human rights has always been one of the most actual problems. Nowadays, global development and international political situation brings the discussion about this issue to another level. But how is it screened through an art? And is art an effective tool to enlighten people about socially important topics? To discuss this, we welcome to the studio Maksym Butkevych, human rights activist and No Borders project coordinator. Hello, and thank you for being with us today.
Hello.
So, Mr. Butkevych, you provide support for refugees, for internally displaced persons and persons without citizenship, so-called stateless people. Of course, Ukraine faced all of these challenges since the start of the conflict in eastern Ukraine in 2014. Could you please compare how did the situation change throughout these 4 years?
Well, thank you for the question. It's not one of the easiest ones. When it comes to refugees, meaning internationally displaced persons, those who claim asylum in Ukraine, fleeing from persecution in their countries of origin, the situation didn't change much, unfortunately, because at the beginning of 2014, we hoped for a reform of the asylum system in Ukraine, which never happened. It never came. However, there is a change when it comes to countries of origin. In 2014 only, there were more nationals of Russian Federation claiming asylum in Ukraine than in 3 previous years combined. And now we face more citizens of Russia arriving to Ukraine fearing persecution due to their political views back home. These are people whom we try to assist, as well as people from other countries. It just happened to be so that our group, our organization, is quite a small organization, to be fair. We work primarily, or those who turn to us, they're primarily from former Soviet Union countries. And we can assess probably what the situation with human rights is in any given country when we check how many people are forced to claim asylum elsewhere. Our traditional troubled states are Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, basically post-Soviet Central Asia. But now we see that Russian Federation is another source country of origin for many refugees.
So is Ukraine such a popular destination point for asylum seekers?
No, it's not. We see that last year, for instance, there was, as far as I remember, almost a historical minimum on how many people or how many persons claimed asylum in Ukraine was around 600 persons. Basically, it's nothing. On an average year, it's 1,000 up to 1,500 applications per year. Ukraine is not a destination country, unfortunately. It's not because people do not want to flee persecution, but they try to cross Ukraine on their way further.
To the European Union?
To the European Union primarily, and I can understand them, because the Ukrainian state so far does not provide any social assistance or any social security, and in many cases does not provide any legal support or legal coverage. So there is a huge chance upon arrival to Ukraine to find that the person finds oneself in a desperate situation without any protection. Would it be legal? Would it be social? So, yep, we face a problem here.
And what about domestic level? On domestic level, what are the major problems that Ukrainian society faces?
Another field of our work, you mentioned already, is internally displaced persons, IDPs, or internal forced migration. And here, situation changed a lot since 2014.
Did it improve?
Before 2014, in the first place, we never had internal displacement on such a scale.
Yes, we never knew how to deal with
exactly.
With this.
And now the situation changed in a way that the vast majority of those who were forced to leave either Crimean Peninsula upon occupation or the war zone in the east, they settled, more or less, most of them without any proper support from the state, but they found their place in the receiving communities. However, the vast majority of them are still in very, very vulnerable situation when it comes to sources of income, households, and level of life. So they are in very difficult situation still, and just not to forget, we talk about 1.5 million persons. It's a huge number.
Yes.
And some of them suffer not only from economic troubles, but also became subjects of discrimination. There are prejudice towards internally displaced persons, and while renting a flat or trying to get a job, or some kids in their new schools, they are forced to encounter these prejudices and to combat them effectively, more or less. I would say that situation, coming to this issue, situation improved since 2014.
But is this prejudice and human rights violations, basically, does this become a topic for an artist to work on? Does it get depicted somewhere on the screen or on other artworks?
I would say so, yes. And DocuDays.ua Documentary Human Rights Film Festival is one of the brightest examples. Maybe not this year, but last year there were several films which portrayed the plight of internally displaced persons. This year there were also films, and some of them became winners, while covering the consequences of war and military conflict on a humanitarian, on a human level, on a personal level. And from our experience, from my own experience, personal one, working with human rights, specifically documentaries, are extremely powerful tool getting the message across. The audience, instead of seeing or hearing all the cliches about all these people who are all, and then we have all these prejudices, who come and take our budget, who take our jobs, who misbehave when it comes to local communities. Instead of these, all of them, documentary passes across a personal story. You see one individual or a family living through difficult times, or maybe happy times, and suddenly cliches doesn't work anymore. Cliche doesn't work because every plight, every individual, every family is distinctively different. And empathy towards an individual is almost unavoidable when it comes to documentaries. And where there is an empathy, there is no prejudice.
What stories did touch you the most during this DocuDays Film Festival? And just to explain our audience that this film festival has recently ended, basically, in the end of March, right?
Yes, a few days ago it came to an end, but the DocuDays.ua team will continue to work and to screen more films throughout the year. And then in autumn there will be traveling DocuDays.ua festival, which means a certain number of films will come to different regions.
In Ukraine, you mean?
In Ukraine, so that people who could not arrive to Kiev, they will be able to go in their hometowns to a place, to a cinema theater, and see them. And it's quite a difficult question, which films touched me the most. Number one, there were 62 films this year. And of course, there is no option of seeing them all. I've been working at the festival as a moderator for 2 out-of-competition programs. And I basically have seen few more films, but nowhere near that number I wanted to. Out of those programs I moderated, there were extremely powerful films in a program dedicated to inequality and prejudice based on ethnicity and so-called race. There was a Czech film, The White World According to Dalibor, which was widely discussed by the audience. It's a portrait of a Czech neo-Nazi, which is almost comical, but also a tragic story. And unfortunately, this year, local far-right groups also paid attention to the festival. And there was an attack against one of the members of the audience after the screening of the film.
Oh, wow.
Just simply because it was quite openly anti-fascist or anti-racist event. But the film itself is really powerful. Another film, part of Holy Equality program, coordinated by my colleague Olga Brzul, There was a film, Dogma, a very controversial film by a Norwegian film director who portrayed the life of jihadists in Syria, those who fight, been members of Jabhat al-Nusra, militant armed group, and specifically two persons who actually prepare themselves to become living bombs at the front line, to blow themselves up together with enemy troops. Very controversial, extremely powerful film. And the opposite to it, in the same program, there was a film, The Departure, about a Zen Buddhist monk in Japan who works with people having suicidal tendencies. Also very powerful, very deep and multi-layered film. When it comes to Ukrainian films, and they were very strongly presented this year, extremely high critical acclaim assessment has been given to, in particular, to a film No Obvious Signs, which became a winner in several competitions. And this film basically uncovers a personal story when it comes to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And the burnout. So many people currently suffer from these phenomena due to war, both military and civilian population, volunteers and human rights workers. So I'm afraid this is a very timely film, but an extremely touchy one.
Do you have any idea how to follow up on the results of this, basically, this art forms depicting this socially important issues?
First, we have all these events organized by uatv.ua throughout the year, and they are not only screenings, they're also discussions. And sometimes they become part of human rights campaigns or efforts. Also, this year there's been a unique for Ukraine, at least it's a unique project called Civil Pitch. uatv.ua as a festival brought together documentary filmmakers and activists from civil society. The filmmakers were looking for stories, and civil society activists had them all. So there was a competition, there was a selection process, and at the end of the day, 4 projects, common projects between a certain filmmaker and a certain organization, were awarded funding, small but still funding, for making a film, which could be used by a film director, as film is usually used in art environment, but could also be used by a certain NGO or activist group in their activities. And I'm happy to say that our organization became one out of 4 winners. We won this funding for a short film about refugees. And we know that when it comes across, we will be happy to show them to as many people as possible, specifically those concerned with the issue of asylum, and maybe also to those who take decisions.
Well, let's hope that this topic about human rights violation and at the same time human rights observance will only draw more attention among the artists in Ukraine and also abroad. And thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
That was Maksym Butkevych, human rights activist and No Borders project coordinator. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Oles Gerjuk. Goodbye.